I'm Cynthia Meilicke, Bereavement, Community, and Allied Services Supervisor here at Hospice of the Foothills. And today, I'm going to talk about my clinical role, which is a grief counselor here. So as a grief counselor here at Hospice of the Foothills, I hear a lot of stories. And these are healing stories. And there's a grief equation that I like to speak of, and it's a life equation, and it is simply that change equals loss equals, for many people and many times through life, grief. And also for many people equals growth. So sometimes the stories I hear, there are insights that are really about that growth part. When I talk to people, groups about advanced care planning, it's also another opportunity to coach people about having those really important conversations. During a talk at a care facility, there was a group of some very healthy, older community members who we had spent a little bit of time, a colleague and I, talking about the nuts and bolts of advanced care planning. And what I like to bring into the conversation is really how to have that conversation. I don't think that people are as afraid to talk about death, even though we are a death-denying culture, as they are just, they don't have the framework or the languaging around how to talk about it. And it's not just one conversation, but it is a conversation that must be initiated, and it's difficult. And this particular time with this group of older people, they got quite excited about speaking to their grown children about their wishes at end of life. And one woman in particular said, knowing my family, I really need to be clear about what goes where. This was the part of the planning, literally, so as not to have problems, so that I know my family won't have problems after that. So sometimes it's easy to have those conversations, and sometimes it's not. It's a pretty common experience for people, even on hospice, after hospice has come into the home, not to talk about their choices, not to talk about the reality that someone is going to die. And this produces a lot of guilt or regret, or can, after a loss occurs. Guilt is like things I did, and that's more guilt. But the regret part, and people often have regret, is things I wish I had done and regret not doing. So often I hear things like, my husband was on hospice for 6 months and we never talked about him dying. Another woman said, one time I remember my husband saying, out of the blue, I'm going to miss this when I'm gone. And it was an opportunity lost. So very much part of the work on the other end. And people do talk about what's going on a very deeply profound way, in a deeply healing way. Again, different stories. There are what is called commonly in the industry the 4 tasks of mourning. And they're pretty simple. I love you. Thank you. Please forgive me. I forgive you. And goodbye. And sometimes just sharing that with a family can facilitate those deep conversations. I will never forget a woman, actually a couple I was working with, a woman who at the end of her life was in our compassionate care home. And she was very courageous and very direct. And she began a conversation with a statement that she wanted more time. And then from there, continued to talk about the last few years of their lives together after her diagnosis, and how they lived their lives, the places they went, the experiences they shared, the conversations, you know, what their life was all about, with this awareness that there was an end in sight, and that they probably knew what she was going to die from. And it was such an incredible opportunity to witness this kind of sharing. And it was a gift at the time, and it became a gift for this husband who, that conversation sustained him in his grief work, and it became part of his healing story. I believe that if we don't mourn well, we do not live well. We do not love well.
My name is Brad Helmuth. I'm the spiritual care coordinator here at Hospice of the Foothills. And one of the things I love about my position is that I get to interact with so many different types of people. And when I talk to people about being a spiritual care counselor and dealing with families at the end of life, they have all sorts of questions about what does that look like. And so I try to explain it to them often. It looks like it would if you were a nurse and you were caring for someone. It's very different for each person that you deal with. It's never the same. It's always dynamic. It's always changing. Things might take you by surprise, but there are a few stories that I would like to share with you to illustrate how I get to care for people in the different ways that they present themselves. I remember one particular patient who obviously never met before, went to see them for the first time, and I showed up at their place. They were renting a place, and when I walked in to their home, you could tell that things were not all the way together, that a crisis had hit their home. Things were disheveled, and it looks like they'd been taking care of other business and not the business of taking care of their home. And so entered in the home, went upstairs, entered into this little apartment, and there the patient was, and his newly married bride. They were together, and you could tell there was a lot of sadness in the room. And I didn't quite know what to do when I first entered into the room, so I just sat, as a lot of times I do, and listen and hear what's going on. And as I sat and I looked around the room, and as I listened to their story of what was going on and how they were feeling and what was really bothering them, I noticed that there were guitars hanging on the wall in their little apartment. And so I just commented on that, as I play guitar, and I thought, well, this is something we have in common. Let's see where this goes. And he talked about his guitar. It had been given to him by someone that he loved very much, and I asked him, can I play it? And he said, absolutely. So I took it, and I sat down with it, and I started playing. And I started playing a tune that was familiar for me, and without really knowing who he was, and he started humming along the tune. And so at that moment, I just started playing the song that he was humming along and singing the words. And as we had that moment together, as I started singing and he sang along, he just sat his head back, and all the chaos that had been present in the room just sort of drifted away for a moment. And he rested, and his bride rested, and tears came down his face. And he just enjoyed that moment. And it was a real special moment for me to be a part of, because again, it's so dynamic, you never quite know what you're going to get into and what you're going to do. Another patient that I really loved spending time with was someone that had been a lifelong church-going person, but in the recent years had had some sort of falling away with her church, and so she wasn't going anymore. And so I got to, over the course of several months, get to know her and provide care for her, spend time with her, pray with her, talk about her family, talk about the things she loved, talk about the things that she regretted about life. And as she was getting close to the end of her life, I got a call from her daughter, and her daughter had asked if I would come and perform a specific sacrament. And I was not a part of her church, but she had asked that I would come and do this, and I felt extremely flattered that she would invite me into her home to help reconcile her to that which she had had all of her life, but for whatever reason she had been disconnected from. And so I got to go in and spend time with her during those final days of her life and provide spiritual care for her, and something that was super important, this sacrament for her. Again, one of the things that I love about working for hospice is there are so many different people, so many different stories. Nothing's the same. There's not a cookie cutter person or a way that you care for them. And so I hope that these stories help you to kind of see how that is.
I'm Liz Ekblad, and I'm a hospice volunteer. I've been volunteering now for 4 years and have had many interesting experiences. I came to hospice as a volunteer because I had a friend who received hospice services, and I was able to watch firsthand the wonderful work that they did and how important it was to this family and to the person's friends. I wasn't sure that I could do it. I was very skeptical about that, but I did go to the training and found that I could put one toe in the water and check it out, and here I am still 4 years later. I'm going to tell you about 3 assignments that I've had. The first one was with a long-term relationship with a patient. I was there for over a year. It was very special to be able to be with a patient that long. When I first came, I was a spiritual care volunteer. And in this case, that meant listening to the woman's talk. She was very lonely. Her son was she was living with her son, and he slept during the day, so she was pretty much alone all day. So we would talk, and she would tell me recipes. She was still able to be up and around, so she would show me some of the things she'd cooked, some of her cookies that she would make. And the son would be sleeping. Later on, as she declined, she needed more full-time care, so the son became the full-time caretaker. When I was with her at this point, he would go out into the community, do the grocery shopping for the week, and have a little free time to himself. The patient and I would talk a lot. She would talk, I would listen. She would show me her crossword puzzles. She would show me scripture that she was interested in, and we would pray together. As she was in her final declining time, she would be sleeping, and when I was with her then, I would read some of her favorite scriptures and also say the prayers that we had said together, knowing that she could hear this in some way. My big adventure at this point is playing the harp in the Comfort Care Home. This is a wonderful instrument. The sounds it makes are just very great, very calming. The purpose of the harp is to provide a calm feeling in the area. And as I play, I have connection with families that come in to visit, with the staff as they walk by. And often the staff will bring a patient to me who will sit near me, maybe someone who's been agitated, and as I play, they calm down a bit. Recently, I had a person who came and sat near me, and as I played, she was calm, and as I kept playing, she got a little agitated. So I stopped playing and I walked over and talked with her. And while we were talking, she was telling me some of her life story. And her eyes were sparkling, and she was thinking back to these happy times. And it was a very special moment for me and for her. Hospice volunteering is very rewarding and interesting and always very different. You never know what's going to happen or where you're going to be, but it is a rewarding experience.